Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi guys, my name is Syadzala Putri and I'm a student of English Department of University of Riau, and I'm here. I'm going to tell you guys about the types of translation. Check it out. Okay, before we go to the types of translation, first I'm going to tell you about the definition of translation. According to Dr. Mrimoy Pramanik, translation is a set of activities that is carried out by a translator to convert a content of a source language to a target language, which are the source language is a language where the idea of the content is written, and the target language is where the idea is going to be converted to. Now we'll discuss about the types of translation. According also to Dr. Mrimoy Pramanik, there are basically three types of translation. The first one is literary and non-literary translation, or you can call it informative translation. And the second one is oral and written translation. And the third one is human assisted translation and computer aided translation. I know this is, you can say 6 types of translation, but there are several factors that divided them all into 3 types: the literary factors, the oral or written, and it is machine aided, or it is a human who translate the content of the translation. Now let's discuss about the types of translation one by one. The first one is literary translation. Literary translation is also divided into several types. The first one is phonemic translation, which is dealing with the translation of the sound. It is very confusing about what are we going to translate about the sound. Now there are 2 components of translation: the source language and the target language. And the phonemic translation is focusing on the sound that is being carried from the source language to target language. The second one of the literary translation is metrical translation. Metrical translation emphasizes the reproduction of matter from the source language into the target language. Next, there is a rhyme translation, which is focusing on translating rhyme. Not translating, it is focusing on converting the rhyme from the source language into a target language. And then the last, there is freestyle. You can say it freestyle translation, because it is focusing on the equivalent of the content of source language. We can say that the several types of translation before, like phonemic, metrical, it only focuses on certain thing, but it doesn't focus on the equivalent of the content. Maybe the content, it can be different from the original one, because they are only focusing for the rhyme, the sound, but the content might be different. But in freestyle, it focuses on the equivalent of the content. So you see, there are many factors that we have to consider in translating literary works, such as poems, plays, novels, because there are, like, in poems we can find metrical matter of the poems, and then we can find how there are several poems that have the same sound in ending, and then when we translate it, it can be different. The content can be different, or the sound can be different. It's up to the translator if he wants to translated according to the phonetical translation or to the equivalence of the content. Next, we have non-literary translation. Non-literary translation is the complete opposite of the literary one, because when we translating literary, as I said before, there are several factors like sounds or something. In non-literary, they don't have such thing, because they are focusing on the meaning, what is the main content and what is the real meaning from the source language into the target language. It must be equivalent, because the types of text or documents that are translated into target language is quite formal. For example, it is like business documents and manual for electronical things and so on. Now we are going to talk about two types of non-literary translation. The first type is legal translation. Legal translation is when you're translating a document, a formal document such as government documents, an agreement between two companies. It is require a legal equivalence of the content, and it is acceptable by the legal jurisdiction. And then the second type is technical translation, which is have to require and translating from technician, I think. The example of the text that is being translated in technical translation is like manual for electronics. You can see when, for example, a cell phone is being made in United States, and then you have to translate the manual into several languages, like in Malay or like in Chinese or something. Now we are going to talk about oral translation and written translation. Now, oral translation, as it said, it is oral, it is spoken. So a translator is speaking to translate a content from source language into target language. Now, oral translation is divided into two. The first one is consecutive translation. Consecutive translation, we can say it requires a small participant in an event. Now, let me give you an example. There are two companies who want to make an agreement, but they cannot speak each other's language. Now, they required a translator. Now, when they have a meeting, the translator, the first one, the company's representative is going to speak in their own language, and then after 5 minutes, the translator will translate what the native speaker said. Now, that is called consecutive translation. It requires small participants in an event, and then they take turns in speaking. The first one is native, and then translating, and so on. I think they can speak about 5 minutes while the translator take notes about the content, the main idea of what the native speaker says, and then they translate it into the target language. The second type of oral translation is called simultaneous translation. Now, simultaneous translation is a bit more expensive than consecutive one, because in simultaneous, the translator translate the content of the source language in the same time as the native speaker said. So you need several items such as microphone, earphone, booth, which are definitely needed when you doing simultaneous translating, and then it's kind of like spontaneous, and then you usually find this simultaneous translation in larger participant. For example, when you go for a fan meeting, or many people have their idol and then have fun meeting, and then they speak different language, and then the idol is speaking and the audience cannot understand what they speak. So there is a translator who translate what the idol said, what the idol say, and then in the same time they can understand that it is quite more expensive and more faster than the simultaneous one. So now we're going to talk about the written type translation. Now it is only different in the form of the content. The first one we talk about the oral one, which is the spoken one, and then now we talk about the written one. The written one, for example, we translate a novel, a document that is in a different language, absolutely. And then there are several things to consider when you are translating written content. The first one is translation integrity, and then accuracy of content and terminology, and then correct spelling and grammar, and then absence of misprints and other errors. Now, I will give you an example that when you translate a novel from English to Indonesian, in English, there are several terminology that is quite famous and which is understandable for every person who read the novel. But then when you translate it into Indonesian, it is quite not similar, because there is no such term in Indonesian, and it is quite hard for the translator to translate the terminology so that we can get the equivalence of the main idea of the content that we are translating. Now we're going to talk about the last type of translation, which are human assisted and computer aided. The human assisted translation is of course done by human being, and then the difference is the one is us human being who translate, and the other one is a machine. And then human being who translate, or being a translator of the content, is usually someone who had learned the language, the source language, extensively. They have to understand the grammar rules, and then some other thing that has to be considered when you are translating something. The last one is computer aided translation. We can see the computer aided. For example, we always use Google Translate when we are confused about something, or any other kinds of computer aided translation. Beside of Google Translate, there are like online dictionary everywhere, you can Google it. And then there are two types of machine translation. The first one is rule-based machine translation technology, that relies on countless built-in linguistic rules and millions of bilingual dictionaries for each language. And then the software in this type parses text and creates a transitional representation from with the text in target language is generated. And then the second one is statistical machine translation technology, which utilizes statistical translation models whose parameters from analysis of monolingual into bilingual corpora and this is the CPU intensive and requires an extensive hardware configuration to run translation models from average performance level. It is quite hard to understand about a computer aided translation, because it is done by some technician that can, they inserted so many words, and then I don't know, I don't really understand about how to make a program that can translate it, but I think I can explain enough about types of translation. So in conclusion, there are three types of translation. I mean, three different contexts of translation. The first one, we can say that literary and non-literary translation, and then the second one is oral and written, and the third one is human assisted and computer aided. I think that's all from me. Thank you for watching, and I hope this can be useful for you, the wonderful audience. Thank you.